Hi everyone, my name is Megan. I'm working with Landon and Rebecca, and we're going to be talking about how insomnia affects mental health. So, first, we're going to start with the definition of insomnia. Insomnia is a common sleep disorder that deals with difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or even waking up too early in the morning. About 8 to 40% of the general population does suffer with insomnia, which is a wide variety of people, but just shows how common it is. This is also associated with mental health disorders like anxiety, depression, and other mood disorders like bipolar. And insomnia does negatively affect someone's attention span, memory, and their memory and their ability to process any emotions. So insomnia can stem from trauma, so that kind of shows how environment plays a key role. Insomnia can start from any childhood trauma or even as adult, any traumas you go through. It just kind of sparks that sleep disorder. Insomnia is common in the locus coeruleus, LC, which releases norepinephrine, which is stress related and it keeps people alert. It's a hormone that gets released into the brain and like during the day, make sure people stay alert and ready. And since people with insomnia, they have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, it is known that the LC may be releasing this hormone, and that's kind of why people are staying awake, the stress from those traumas. Insomnia can also disrupt the brain's ability to regulate emotions and process information, which is also what leads to some mental health disorders by, messing up the brain regulation. So next we're going to talk about some other brain regions that are common with insomnia. So aside from the LC, there are two main systems to control sleep. There's process S, which focuses on your sleep drive, and process C, which focuses on your circadian rhythm. So process S kind of it builds up while during the day while we're awake, and it kind of gets us sleepy throughout the day. So when it's time to go to bed, process S kind of reaches that full capacity, and that's when we go to sleep. And process C, that circadian rhythm, is that internal body clock we have. So it's when we're awake in the morning because it's light out, our body tells us it's awake, but then at nighttime, our body knows it's time to go to bed. So that kind of urges us to go to bed. So process S and C work together to make sure we're awake during the day and asleep at night. But it's been shown in studies with insomnia that people are kind of stuck between, or studies are stuck between the idea of either process S or process C, are insufficient. So either people with insomnia, they maybe don't have that drive, that sleep drive during the day, or maybe they are lacking an internal body clock. It's kind of back and forth between the two. There's no set reason. Some people may have insufficiency with process S, some people process C. It just depends. But and there's some other regions like the VPLO, the lateral preoptic nucleus, which does promote non-rapid eye movement sleep. And there's also the MNPO, medium preoptic nucleus, that regulates homeostasis in sleep. So our brain kind of has this on and off switch for sleeping and staying awake, kind of dealing with that process S, process C. But with people with insomnia, it kind of seems like that on-off switch doesn't function correctly. So that kind of means like our when it's time to sleep, our brain is actually turning that flip on that we should be awake. And then during the day when we're supposed to be awake, our brains would be flipping that switch to make it off. So people with insomnia, there's a bunch of regulations that are not up to date, and that's why they kind of have difficulty sleeping.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the link between environmental factors and insomnia. So, environmental factors include things like noise, light, temperature, and work conditions. Some noise and light factors include traffic and construction, poorly shaded bedrooms, and blue light or artificial light. For example, if your room is too bright at night, your body has a harder time falling and staying asleep. Research shows that noise alone, like traffic or neighbors, can increase the chances of waking up in the middle of the night by up to 40%. Light from phones or streetlights can delay the release of melatonin, which is the hormone that helps us fall asleep. Temperature factors include overheated bedrooms, especially during the early spring when temperatures begin to rise from winter. And then some work conditions that can lead to insomnia include overnight or shift work and stress from work. Now we'll get into whether these environmental factors are as significant as mental health triggers. So these environmental triggers are especially important when we're talking about short-term insomnia. This is pretty much when you can't sleep after traveling or during a heat wave. The good news is that they're usually easy to fix. For example, you could block out light, use a white noise machine, or adjust the temperature in your room. On the other hand, mental health factors like anxiety, depression, or chronic stress tend to play a bigger role in long-term or chronic insomnia. In fact, around 85% of people with depression also report symptoms of insomnia. These issues often cause cognitive arousal, things like racing thoughts or constant worry, which keep the brain too active to fall asleep. And unfortunately, poor sleep can make mental health worse, creating a feedback loop. And that's pretty much the thing I have on the slide. So environmental stressors, they can worsen mental health, which leads to poor sleep, which leads to more stress. And it's basically just this constant loop that continues to happen. So if we were to compare the two, environmental issues are more likely to cause situational or short-term insomnia. Mental health is more often the driver behind persistent or chronic insomnia. And pretty much both are significant, but they affect different types of insomnia and often interact with each other. So in the end, it's not really a question of which one matters more. It's pretty much how they work together.
Now that we've talked about the environmental factors and brain regions involved in insomnia, I want to shift the focus to why sleep is so important and how not getting enough of it can seriously impact our mental health. We all know that we feel our best when we get the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's because during sleep, our brains are busy resetting. They flush out toxins, process and store information from the day, and rejuvenate themselves to function optimally the next day. When we sleep well, we're better at cognitive tasks that require things like concentration, problem solving, and planning ahead. Just as importantly, sleep helps regulate our emotions, reduces irritability, and supports mood stability. But when we don't get enough sleep, especially over long periods of time, like for the people with chronic insomnia disorder, it becomes harder to handle even the small stressors in our day-to-day lives. A 2022 study by Gong and colleagues found that people with chronic insomnia showed lower activity in their prefrontal cortex while doing cognitive tasks compared to people without insomnia. Another longitudinal study from the UK Biobank identified key brain regions involved in the link between sleep quality and mental health: the prefrontal cortex, lateral orbitofrontal cortex, and the hippocampus, which play major roles in emotion, memory, and how we handle stress. Now let's talk about the long-term consequences of not getting enough sleep. While insomnia can be a symptom of some mental health issues, it may also cause or worsen mental health issues later in life. In fact, lack of sleep has been strongly linked to higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts. Sleep deprivation studies show that even people without any mental health diagnoses can feel more anxious and emotionally distressed after just one night of poor sleep. For people already struggling with mental health disorders, lack of sleep can make their symptoms worse and increase the risk of serious outcomes. The UK Biobank study of over 10,000 adults found that people with insomnia were 5 times more likely to develop symptoms of depression and 20 times more likely to develop a panic disorder in the future. Another study from Harvard backed this up, showing that insomnia is a strong predictor of depression and many different types of anxiety disorders. People with chronic insomnia disorder are 10 times more likely to experience clinical levels of depression and 17 times more likely to deal with clinical anxiety compared to people who sleep well. High school and college students, such as myself and my group mates, are especially at risk to experience the after effects of lack of sleep. While the recommended sleep range for young adults is between 7 to 9 hours per night, many college students are sleeping much less than that. Studies have found high rates of mental illness among students, with between 28% and 32% of students reporting having a mental health condition. Most mental health disorders begin to present symptoms in young adulthood, which can be worsened by the lack of sleep known all too well by students. All of this research points to the important conclusion that sleep plays a large role in our mental health. However, studies have shown that when our sleep improves, our mental health often does too, regardless of the severity of mental health symptoms or the presence of comorbid health conditions. This is why researchers and clinicians are now pushing for sleep to be treated as a core part of mental health care. In conclusion, insomnia is not only a common symptom of mental health issues, but also a contributing factor to their development. Short-term sleep disruptions may impact aspects of day-to-day life, but long-term lack of sleep can be a key predictor for mental health issues such as anxiety and depression later in life. Disruptions in key brain regions such as the locus coeruleus, ventrolateral preoptic nucleus, and median preoptic nucleus can interfere with healthy sleep patterns, putting individuals, especially students, at greater risk. However, by recognizing the importance of sleep and working to improve its quality, we can reduce the risk of long-term psychiatric symptoms and support overall mental well-being. Moving forward, giving healthcare professionals more tools and knowledge about how to support healthy sleep can make a real difference, and future research should keep exploring how and why improving sleep has such powerful effects on our mental well-being.